lost secrets, testaments of Mary and Joseph, what were they doing in Egypt, type of thing. I mean, the guy was a genius. He was also, that Bunsen chap, friends with Florence Nightingale, who was inspired by him to go and visit. She didn't know what to do with her life. She was a clever young woman in her late teens, wanted to do something to help society like all those kind of people, like all of us, right? Didn't know what to do. So Bunsen said, he knew her socially through friends of friends, why don't you come and look at this hospital in Germany? We're developing new nursing techniques where we actually care about hygiene and we make the patients comfortable. We care about their well-being. We care about their spiritual well-being. We care about we act as a middleman between the doctors that come around now and then and the actual patient as a person, as a living person. We care about them as all-rounded. That's what Germans are pioneering in this hospital. And Florence was so impressed, she went to study there. And she, through Bunsen's connections, she got to look around the hospital and spent some time studying there. And that's where she decided her mission was to bring this new approach to nursing to Britain, which was backward. We were just like locking people up and letting them die of fleas and pestilence and, I mean, so Florence then developed nursing, and we all know the story. She went to the Crimea and she got involved in helping to save as many lives as she could. I mean, that was military capitalism at its most bonkers, the Crimean War. Utter nonsense. They were just testing the weapons, and any excuse they'd send the Red Regiments and the British troops, charge of the Light Brigade. They were feeding this nonsense to Eton graduates, and that's who's been running the country ever since. They think that they're doing Christ's work by going and killing Russians and slaughtering each other in the Crimea. I mean, Bunsen knew a lot better, and actually he managed to keep Germany out of that war. They were also friends of Queen Victoria, both the Duke of Argyll, Bunsen and Max Muller. And they used to meet up, they would chat. She would come to Inverary Castle. And so when I lived there, I felt like a neighbour of these people. And I felt, gosh, it's like, thank you, gods, for sending me here and living in this castle. And I set up the Centre for the Study of Divine Intelligence because I've come to the view over many years of scholarship that there is obviously a divine intelligence behind history, which is what the Duke of Argyll was saying, what Bunsen was saying, what Max Muller was saying, and it's what I'm saying, And, well, what is that divine intelligence? Where does it come from? How does it manifest in different sequences of prophetic revelation? How does it manifest in the Quran? How does it manifest in the Gospels? How did it manifest through the personhood of Jesus? How did the Logos come to incarnate in Jesus? How does it manifest in the Rishis, in the Upanishads, in the Vedas? How does it manifest through the Jain seers who've written down their great sutras? How did it manifest in the mind of Buddha? How did that moment of awakening, that enlightenment, how did that happen? These are all questions that come under that rubric, the Centre for the Study of Divine Intelligence. And that's now here in France. I mean, that's what I'm running here still. And that's why I'm doing my commentaries on the Quran and all these other sacred texts, is to find that divine intelligence that operates in and through history. Now, it's interesting that the Scientific and Medical Network, with its new Galileo Commission, is asking similar questions. They're now saying, looks like science is saying, maybe there's a divine intelligence behind the way particles seem to leap about in different orders and systems. And, maybe there's a beauty behind nature that shows there's something divine at work. Hold that thought, I'll come back to it. So anyway, that's today we celebrate Max Muller. We also celebrate Carl Wilhelm Grimm, a German philologist and a linguist and a folklorist who lived at that same time in the German Enlightenment. And he mastered Sanskrit, he studied the ancient folklore and history. Grimm's tales are famous. And he was a true Savile and a Europhile. And then we come to our Buddhist of the day, Milarepa. Now, Milarepa was just to die for, Tibetan Buddhist mystic who spent a lot of time studying. He was born in 1025, died in 1143, was a poet. He's regarded as the second patriarch of the Kagyupa sect, and his guru Marpa was his teacher, and Marpa was quite tough on Milarepa. You know, you don't get to be a guru unless you really do your bit. You have to put in the spade work. And then Milarepa, he's an interesting character. There's a movie about his life story, because he started off in his youth practicing black magic in order to take revenge on relatives who deprived his mother of the family inheritance. And so he went off and studied with a famous Bon magician and learned the art of, you know, cursing and all that stuff to take revenge. But then he realised this was silly. He repented. He had a breakthrough moment, and black magic is not the path to go down. And instead he wanted to study Buddhist metaphysics. And he studied under Naropa, who was the Bengali master of Tantra at Nalanda. Now, I've been to Nalanda. It's still there. It's now ruins, rediscovered by British archaeologists. To die for. You know, if you get a chance, go to Patna, as it's called, and in Bihar. Go and sit in the ruins of Nalanda and just see if you can hear the conversation between these great Buddhist scholars, Milarepa studying with Marpa. Then he went back to Tibet and he became a wandering poet. In a sense, he's one of the founders of my order of wandering peace poets. And he wrote many great verses, which are classic. Evans Wentz, who translated the Tibetan Book of the Dead, also translated Milarepa's works, which are still repaying the study. You know. Okay, so those are the saints of today, and then we come finally to the Christians. There's a whole variety, St. Anthony of Padua, many others, but the Protestant, or the eclectic one I've chosen, is Douglas Hyde, who was a scholar and a professor of literature in Dublin, 1860 to 1949. I discovered him through my Druid research, and he translated from Gaelic into English the historical works of Geoffrey Keating, who I was told to read by the founder of the Fellowship of ICEPS, Reverend Derlin Robertson, who first put Keating in my hands in his library in Ireland and said, "Thomas, read that. You're not literate in Irish history till you study that." I'd never even heard of it. You know, in British English education at the time, I was taught in the 60s and 70s, you know, you never heard about this kind of stuff. And even to this day, I mean, it's incredible. You can't do a GCSE in Gaelic, Irish, anywhere in any English school, as far as I'm aware. And yet it was being spoken in Ireland and written in poetry when the English hadn't arrived in the island, you know. And the great tales of Cuchulainn, the old Druid stories, are literature that was 1,000 years old before the English even arrived in the island. That's what I learned by going to Ireland, meeting these people and studying their culture, like a sort of anthropologist studying a strange country. And then I realised, actually, hang on, this strange country is my country. I'm part Irish. This is my history, my heritage I'm learning. And these people and me are at war. That's why I became a peace activist over the island thing, because their stories and our stories should be one intertwined struggle for peace, not one intertwined struggle for victory and mutual annihilation. You know, I went to Belfast. That's why I set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Britain and Ireland, because I'd read Keating, because I'd read Douglas Hyde. Now, Douglas Hyde became the first president of the Irish Republic after their revolution in 1916 and their sad civil war. Finally, they got the Republic declared, and he became the first ever president from 1932 to 1944. You know, a scholar president. I mean, that's unheard of. But that's what the Irish are like. Every Irishman I've ever met and woman, they're scholars, poets, bards, sages, lovers of wisdom, and most of them are some kind of a Christian as well as a pagan. You know, it's the done thing in Ireland. You can be both, like I am. It's the same in Japan. You have to be both pagan, Shinto, and Buddhist to qualify as a proper civilized person. And yet in England, these people can't think outside binary stuff. So it's either you're for or against, or black or white. This is primary school level of thinking. And yet that's what prevails in among English schools, so-called. The Irish were producing scholars of immense sophistication, John Scotus Erigena, and countless generations of Druid scholars that we have names for. That's why I did my Encyclopedia of Druid Studies. And a lot of it is based on the Irish and the Welsh and the Scottish and the Cornish. And these traditions are precious. Also Breton and wider Gaul, because the Gauls were Druid civilization for thousands of years before the Romans under Caesar came and tried to destroy it all. They didn't succeed. The Gauls carry on to this day. Anyway, Douglas Hyde, we salute you. Great man, great scholar, great first president of Ireland. And I'm really pleased that Ireland is not just lying down to Boris Johnson and his lies, and is still standing firm with Europe as our brother and sister across the waters there. Okay, now that's very exciting. I hope you agree with me. So I do that every day. I look through, I rehearse, and whoever's here, we join in. And if you want to join in from where you are, get the book. It's published. Commune with these people. These are great sages each day of the year. If you have a little study circle or a little Sufi group or a Kabbalistic group, come together with your friends, your family, and just honour these people's names. Learn about them. I've given you a little summary of them, but you can find this out for yourself. And you can make suggestions. Whose names should I have got in there that I haven't? Have I got Taliesin in there? Well, yes, actually, the Bard of Britain. Have I got Isaac Luria in there? Yes, of course I have. Have I got Moses? Yes. Have I got Zoroaster? Yes, of course. Have I got Lao Tzu? Those are the big ones. They're all there. But it's the obscure little ones that history's forgotten. They're also in there. Talking of which, I want to talk just briefly about something that I discovered this week. I think it's very exciting. And when I was a little boy growing up in Brighton, I used to listen to Radio 3 and Radio 4 on a little tiny radio I had. And it was my little secret pleasure, 10 o'clock at night, I should be asleep, but I was listening to the radio. And there were often very good little documentaries on, like world travel tales. The BBC in those days was a proper broadcasting institution. And I remember one, I must have been, 9 or something? 8? And it was an amazing tale of the Tarim Basin. Somebody, I think a BBC correspondent or somebody had been there, and they were rehearsing the history of the Tarim Basin and its splendid history throughout. And it began, in ancient times, it was a Buddhist area. I just was beginning to hear, what's this Buddhism? It always interested me. They believed in reincarnation. I thought, well, what's that? So I'd already started reading and studying. I was about 9 or 10. And this radio program made a huge impression because I felt, gosh, I know that place. It was a sort of inner knowing. It's like I could see in my mind's eye, listening to this broadcast, the Tarim Basin. And I knew it was one of the secret places in history, which was really exciting. I made a kind of inner vow that I'd visit there one day, which I still would like to fulfill. So anyway, fast forward, it's now where the Uighurs live in China, and of course we all know there's a big conflict between the Chinese Communist Party clamping down on the Uighurs, who are, because they're Muslim, right? And there's a sort of binary thinking going on that you can't be a proper communist or a Chinese patriot and also a Uyghur Muslim. And it's creating a problem. I think that's false. I mean, I think you can be a loving patriot of any country, tending towards the non-violent wing of that country, and be a Muslim. Anyway, I've been doing some research, and the Uyghurs originally were Buddhist tribes of Turks before they became Muslim. And they had a huge kingdom in the Tarim Basin called Qoco. Just 1 second. Right, sorry about that. I've got a bit of a cough. And, yes, living alone, one doesn't give long discourses. But, so, thanks for bearing with me. This Kingdom of Qoco, I've been doing some research on it. It's absolutely fascinating. It reinforces what I discovered all those years ago, age 9, about the Tarim Basin. This was a kingdom of Uighurs, who were Buddhists, who'd been brought the sutras from the great travelling Buddhists of northern India, who'd gone up all the way into Central Asia to the Tarim Basin, across the mountains. They had first translated the Buddhist sutras into Tocharian, which is an ancient language very close to Persian and Indo-European origin. From Tocharian they were translated into Uyghur, and scholars have discovered stashes of Uyghur Buddhist manuscripts hidden in caves from this kingdom of Qoco. And Chinese pilgrims, travellers visited, and it was flourishing for 800 years. We have the king lists, and there were Buddhist sages, they had temples. There were about 50 temples just in the capital city alone, which is called Qoco. And then there were also Nestorian churches. The Nestorian Christians were the Asian or Oriental Christian branch, coming largely from Syriac sources, who were faithful to the St. Thomas tradition, which I stand for as a Thomas. You know, they had churches in Tibet, in China. The Nestorian Christians were interesting people, let's put it like that, and they had bases in the Lakhmid Arabic kingdom of Hira, which was a city which Muhammad went to as a young merchant working for Khadija, and he learned all these Nestorian tales of Jesus. And they had Gnostic gospel manuscripts as well. The Nestorians were sort of the Gnostic branch, if you want, of the universal church. And here they are in the Tarim Basin, in the Uyghur kingdom. And there's some wonderful travellers' tales told of them by Chinese visitors who said, look, the done thing in the Uyghur kingdom of Qoco is you kind of go temple visiting and you put on your finest clothes, you dress up and you wander about as a sort of social thing in the evenings, and you flirt with the nice people you meet out. You know, a bit like on the seafront at Cannes, everyone walks up and down in their posh clothes and falls in love with each other. So they were doing it in the Tarim Basin way back. Now we have these king lists, and it lasted up until 1469. 1469, like that's recent history really, when the Qoco ruler became a sultan and converted to Islam. But you see, the Buddhist traditions were in their blood. They'd never gone away. They were reading the Quran in a Buddhist way, which is how I'm giving it in my commentary. They were reading it as a missive of universal wisdom. And if you read the Quran in that way, which my commentary is doing, as a download from the universal mother of the books, then it's totally compatible to be a Druid, a Buddhist, a pagan, a Christian, a Muslim, all at the same time. In fact, it's stupid not to be, because they're all just variants of the one light. just like a rainbow has many colours. So of course, we're all made of pure light, the white light of nirvana, but we can all manifest in whatever, purple, green, orange, pink, you know, depending on how we're sitting in space-time at that particular time, which is what happens with the rainbow, and it's what happens with us humans. And what I'm saying is that the prophetic intelligence that downloads into consciousness in the human form takes the cultural tinge of the time and space of that download. So in Mecca, in Medina, it comes out as the Quran. In you know, Sarnath and the Buddhist areas, it comes out as Buddhism. In Christ's context, it comes out as Christianity. In the Moses tradition, it comes out as that. And so on and so on. Now, what is so amazing about this Kingdom of Qoco is that they knew all that. And that's why they were so interfaith and tolerant. And I reckon, and it's a speculation, that perhaps the Shambhala legends of later times actually refer to the historical memory of the Uyghur and the Tarim Basin at its cultural apogee for 800 years. This is a really exciting field. Scholars are still studying it. And, you know, searching for the lost enlightenments of the past is one very important way we can bring that enlightenment up to date to the present. So my advice to the Chinese Communist Party is, instead of persecuting the Uyghurs, let them learn about their own heritage. Let them learn about the immense complexity of their wonderful version of Islam. Look at the great Uyghur scholars who synthesized Buddhism with Shiism, with Sunnism, with esoteric teachings of Chinese Taoism, with Confucianism. You know, they were doing the advanced work. That's what I think China should be celebrating now, and finding who were the great thinkers in China at that time. What were they doing with the Uyghurs? You know, there's a conversation to have. It's not very nice to just lock up people of a different culture or ethnicity or religion in camps. You know, that's what the Nazis did. I mean, that's very, very uncivilized. Stop going down that route. That's my advice to my Chinese friends. So I thought it was very exciting to find these Uyghurs in the Tarim Basin doing advanced Buddhist stuff way back when, you know, like the original Shambhala Kingdom. Okay, and the Shambhala Kingdom, here's a lovely book called We Are Not the First, Andrew Thomas, which talks about the Shambhala legends. You'll find, I mean, maps and stuff in here. I have several books in my Buddhist section on how to get to Shambhala. It's in the Alice Bailey teachings, and it was there in Nicholas Rurik, who's got a picture on the wall behind me. Shambhala is the place of enlightenment. It stands for a polity that it is possible to be enlightened in. And where was it? Well, I think it was the Uyghur Kingdom of Qoco. Okay, moving on. The other thing I want to share, I've been having quite a busy week actually, it's been really exciting, is a very interesting conference I sat in on with the Scientific and Medical Network and the Galileo Commission. We were very honoured to have a talk by Vandana Shiva, who I've always known as a great thinker and an activist. And she is a fascinating woman. She gave a brilliant talk for nearly an hour yesterday. And because, you know, not many people were able to hear that live, I'm going to share a summary of what she said because it's worth repeating. So Vandana is an Indian intellectual. I think she lives in Delhi. She lives in India. She has a PhD in quantum theory, which she studied looking at Einstein's relativity theories, quantum theory. I haven't read it. I don't know the details. It'd be interesting to see, you know, the actual text. And she then has been very active in the Green movement. Now, since I set up the Green University way back in 2000, the Global Green University, obviously I'm a green philosopher. I worked with Henryk Skolimowski, John Francis Phipps, and other philosophers in the green tradition, and a lot of my work is premised on that. And I used to speak at the Green Gathering, the big Green Gathering. Every year I'd go and give a talk with other colleagues when we used to meet in Wiltshire in the glorious golden 1990s, before the world went mad at 9/11, you know. back in the pre-9/11 days when people still trusted each other and there was still bonhomie and camaraderie among intellectuals. Now we're all in camps fighting each other. I say, with quizzical nostalgia. Anyway, so Vandana has been really doing some homework, and she, like me, was very galvanized by these terminator seeds that Monsanto were producing. Seeds that self-destruct. All nature, living things, they have their plants, they have their thing that then lead to seeds that reproduce. No, Monsanto decided to invent a plant that didn't have seeds, so you'd have to keep coming back to the company and buying new seeds. It was a way of capitalism asserting its thuggery. I discovered around that time, and Vandana, I don't know if she knows this, that Monsanto started its life as a manufacturer of nuclear weapons. It moved into the agricultural industry, but it started out making nuclear weapons. Shocking. Which is, industrial capitalism taken to an absolute, nth degree. Anyway, she and I, in our separate ways, I'm at the University of London then, she was off in India. We both became green activists. And she's stuck. I'm a specialist more in the religious, philosophical heritage of mankind. She got very deeply into looking at agriculture. She researched what's wrong with agriculture. Why is a lot of India like desert, and why aren't the soils productive? What's going on here? And she spent 10, 20 years doing comparative agricultural studies and ecology, and she's to die for, fount of information. To summarise what she shared with us, her critique of current agricultural practices, which is dumbing down the planet, is that it's all premised on monoculture. So you have one field that grows one crop, and you try and pump up the yield of that crop by putting in fertilizers. So you buy fertilizers, you stick it in, and you get bumper crops. Now, pretty soon the soil gets deteriorated, so you have to put in more and more fertilizer to get, the same yield. And gradually the soil doesn't have healthy microbes in it, doesn't have healthy insect life, it doesn't have healthy, little fungi and all kinds of life codes floating about in it. The soil becomes just a sort of a virgin thing to pump in pesticide. Well, they also add pesticides, by the way, but no, it's a thing for fertilizer. Now, this is the model of farming. This was the agricultural revolution. Well, in India, they called it the Green Revolution. And wherever this has been brought in, it's led to the deterioration of the soil and the deterioration of the health of the people, because her argument is that organic farming respects biodiversity. It doesn't put in pesticides. It doesn't rely on industrial fertilizers. It believes that nature has enough complex biodiversity to produce healthy crops, but it tends to want to plant 2 or 3 in every field. It plants them in a group. Now, she discovered in her research that that's what indigenous people have done historically. That's what the American Indians did when the whites first came to New England. That's how they were taught to plant the squash with, the other native plants. Never in just mono fields. You plant them in a little group. And it's the same in Africa. That's how African farming flourished, and it was the same originally in India. That's why Indian agriculture worked very well in the old days. When the British came, they changed all that. They switched to this monocultural, big-style farming using fertilizers and pesticides. And that's what she's declared war on. She has done her research, very interesting, amazing stuff. She's discovered that the firms that make all the pesticides for agricultural big business are the same people that were helping Zyklon B being produced, IG Farben. They were the industrial chemists of Germany who were helping the Nazi war cause. And they were working with Americans, big companies making chemicals in alliance with Germany and America. Then, after the war, they got addicted to these profits, because you make huge profits. And they invented, well, I tell you what, we'll sell this model of agriculture around the world, wherever American imperialism goes, or British imperialism, or whatever, we'll sell this model. and will make huge profits. So the big agrochemistry companies, with their plastic sacks of fertilizer, first decimated the fields of North America. It looks good for the first 2 years. You have great crops of wheat, but after a while the soil begins to die. And so she's a fan of people like Wendell Berry, the organic resistance in America, who've said, no, that's not how to farm. We should go back to the pluricultural ways of the native peoples. We should be working with the land, with, dare I say it, the spirits of the land, because for the American Indian, for these indigenous agriculturalists, growing plants to make food is not just a sort of business. It was a spiritual way of life, living in some symbiosis with the plant kingdoms and worshipping the kami of nature. That's how Japan became a great agricultural nation, using these kinds of techniques as well. And China, before, no doubt under the Communist Party, they're all, they adopted the methods of monoculturalism. But I think possibly less. I think the Chinese might be a bit cleverer, and the Japanese certainly are. Anyway, this was her talk, and it was a masterpiece. I can only just summarise the quintessence. She had behind her a sculpture of Einstein that she herself made when she was younger, and a picture of the goddess of food, Annapurna, who, like everything in India, there's a goddess or a god for everything, and of course food is a goddess, Annapurna, because eating is such a sacred act. That's why I always say grace before I eat. And, it's giving thanks to matter, to Mother Earth, for feeding us, giving us bodies so that we can be strong, healthy and vibrant creatures doing our work and our play. In my case, it's intellectual work. I'm not a sportsman. I'm a sportsman of ideas. And so is Vandana. Anyway, she had the picture of the goddess of food behind her, bless her. So she's a genius, this woman. David Lorimer, who chaired it very well, said rightly that she deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. I think she'll get it, I would certainly vote for her. Then we heard a brilliant response by Satish Kumar, who runs the Schumacher College, an old friend of mine. Met him on and off over the years, and I discovered some years ago, reading his autobiography, that he was a disciple within the monkish Jain order of Acharya Tulsi, and they were good friends. Acharya was much older, this was a young monk. Well, I also met Acharya Tulsi when I went to India in '95, and he was a great man. So you can read about him in my autobiography. So anyway, it was lovely to see Satish again. He just spoke about, how important Vandana's perspective is, and he spends a lot of his time teaching, but he loves to do gardening as well. He says it grounds him. Being in nature is very important. And like Voltaire, we should cultivate our own garden, he said. Bless him, Satish is still going strong. And then we heard from a very nice chap called Colin Tudge, who's a professor who's taught at the University of Oxford. He's one of Britain's leading experts on the evolution of life. I have an amazing book of his, published by the University of Oxford Press, looking at the different family trees of life, how from little simple-celled creatures, these organic bodies of humans and complex birds and fish, how did we all evolve? Where did we come from? What's the story here? And Colin is an expert in that. He's a genius, this guy. But he's also very humble. He's a philosopher as well, I would say. And he was very mindful of the ethical dimensions of what Vandana was saying. And he posed a real problem to the group. Yes, we know that kind of industrial agricultural